The bell at the front desk rang once, sharp, and the guy leaned over the counter like he owned it. No lagi, no code, just wet hair and a grin that kept slipping. He pushed a phone toward me with a booking email on it. Wrong name, wrong date. He tapped the screen hard and kept tapping like pressure could make it true. I was alone on night audit, the kind of shift where the building feels like it's holding its breath. I'd already dealt with drunks, noise calls, and a couple trying to argue a free upgrade out of me. I wanted my coffee and my spreadsheet and silence. Instead, I got this guy, dripping on the marble like he'd just come in from the rain, smiling like the desk was a stage. His eyes didn't settle. They jumped. Counter, key rack, my hands, the little gap where the swing gate opened. People who are actually tired stare at the floor. People who are actually lost stare at the signs. This guy stared at access. I asked for ID. He laughed and told me to stop being a bitch about it. I kept my voice flat, like I was reading policy off a card. No ID, no key. Wrong name, wrong date, no key. I pulled up the guest list and angled the monitor away. He kept watching my hands instead of my face. He pointed at a room number on his phone and said he needed a key right now. That number belonged to a woman who checked in alone an hour earlier. I remembered her because she'd asked, quiet, if we had cameras in the hall. She wasn't dramatic, just careful. She'd gone upstairs with one suitcase and a tired look like she planned to pass out and wake up early. Now this asshole had her room number like he'd earned it. I said I couldn't give him anything. He started talking faster, like if he kept moving I'd get swept along. Said she was his girlfriend. Said she was mad and wouldn't answer. Said I was putting her in danger by not letting him in. Then he switched lanes and tried money, slipping a folded bill onto the counter like it was casual, like bribing a stranger to violate a woman's privacy was just part travel. I pushed the bill back with a pen and told him to leave. He didn't. He stared at the pen like he wanted to take it and stick it in my eye, then smiled and asked what time I got off. That did it. I hit the latch and swung the gate shut harder than I needed to, locked it, and backed up so the counter stayed between us. I refused, and he stepped around the counter, opening like he meant to come back here with me. I slammed the gate shut and locked it. He slammed his palm on the counter and called me names like he was warming up. He didn't threaten exactly. He didn't need to. He let his hand sit there, big and steady, like a paperweight. He watched me watch it. Then he lifted his phone and pointed it at me like he was filming, like he wanted me to know he could keep a version of this. I call the back office. Dead air. Management goes home at 6 and leaves a binder of procedures like paper stops fists. I hover my fingers over 911 and hated that I was thinking about response times, about whether they'd show, about whether he'd still be here when they did. He didn't leave. He sat in the lobby chair facing the desk and waited, quiet, staring through the glass like a patient animal. That waiting was the worst part. If he yelled, maybe someone would notice. Waiting meant he was comfortable. Waiting meant he expected time to work for him. I pulled up the camera feeds and scanned the lot. The front row was empty. No obvious car. Either he parked where the cameras don't catch plates, or he didn't come in alone. The thought made my throat go dry. A guest came down for ice and did that polite nothing thing. Eyes sliding away, pretending we were both normal. Another guy wandered in from outside and asked if the alarm system was still acting up because it had gone off last week. I said no. Wet Hair's grin twitched like he liked that detail. He shifted once, slow, and I realized he'd positioned himself so he could see both exits like he wanted to be sure I couldn't slip out without passing him. He wasn't just waiting. He was holding the room. At 2:40, the fire alarm tripped. Not smoke. A pull station. The panel screamed. The lobby doors unlocked for safety. Red lights flashed and the magnets in the doors clicked free. People think alarms make you safer. They don't think about what they unlock. He stood up the second the doors clicked. He walked toward the stairs like he knew where he was going. No hesitation, no confusion. No, is this real? Just movement. My brain finally caught up and screamed at me that he'd been waiting for this. I snatched the master key ring and ran, because the alternative was sitting there while he went upstairs. I grabbed the master key ring and sprinted ahead because my legs moved before my brain caught up. The stairwell echoed with the alarm so hard it rattled my teeth. I took the steps two at a time and nearly ate shit on the turn because my hands were sweaty and the keys swung like a weapon I didn't know how to use. Doors cracked open behind me. People half awake, swearing, confused. Nobody followed. Everybody assumes someone else will handle it. I hit the third floor and saw him at her door, already there, already trying to handle like it was his. No knock, no name, just the handle testing and his ear angled toward the latch, like he was listening to a safe. I shoved between him and the door and jammed the key in to lock it from the outside. The lock clicked, and for a second, I felt like I'd won. Then he grabbed me. He grabbed my wrist and twisted. I dropped the keys. They clattered down the hall. Pain shot up my arm, and my grip went useless. He pulled me close, and I caught the shine of his teeth in the alarm lights. He leaned in like he wanted to make it private and disgusting. He leaned in close and whispered something ugly about how nobody comes on alarms because everyone assumes it's bullshit. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a random creep trying his luck. That sounded practiced, like he'd timed it, like he'd watched staff scatter on false alarms and learned where the gaps were. I headbutted him. I felt my own nose explode into pain. Warm blood ran straight down my lip. He staggered back, more surprised than hurt, and I kicked his knee sideways. It popped wrong, and he went down hard. He went down hard and started laughing like it was a game. That laugh turned my stomach. I wanted him scared. He was entertained. Doors opened up and down the hall. People peeked out, half asleep, annoyed, filming. Nobody stepped in. Nobody wanted to be the hero at 3 a.m. in a hotel hallway. A guy held his phone up and just recorded. Someone yelled that they had work in the morning. A woman cracked her door and shut it again. It was like watching a crowd at a crash who won't get out of their cars. Wet Hair pushed himself up, limping, still smiling. I felt the hallway tilt, adrenaline and blood and the strobe lights. I scooped the keys off the carpet with shaking hands and backed toward the housekeeping closet because it was the only solid door I trusted. I picked the keys up with shaking hands and locked myself in the housekeeping closet until police arrived. In the dark between detergent shelves, I called 911 and tried to sound calm, like calm would make it real and fast. Outside, I heard him move, not running, just walking the hall, trying doors once, then twice like he was shopping. At one point, he stopped right outside the closet, and I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. He didn't yank it. He just stood there a second, then walked away. Then I heard radios, boots, voices barking commands. Somebody rattled the closet handle and yelled my name. When I opened it, the hallway looked normal again except for the blood on my shirt and the dents in the carpet where we'd gone down. 2 officers had him pinned near the stairwell, his hands behind his back, his face still wearing that stupid smile like he was about to file a complaint. When they dragged him out, he kept yelling that I knew him, that I invited it, like lies were another tool he carried. The woman in that room never opened her door while it happened. The officers knocked and told her to stay inside. When she finally cracked it later, she looked like she'd been holding her breath for an hour, eyes wide, phone in her hand. She didn't ask what he wanted. She already knew. Later, when the alarm finally shut off and the lobby settled, my manager called and asked why the doors had unlocked, why guests were complaining, why I'd left the desk. I stared at the phone and couldn't believe the order of priorities. I told her there was blood on my face and police in our hallway. She went quiet for half a second, then asked if I'd filled out the incident form. The alarm report later said malfunction. The pull station cover sat snapped off and missing. He didn't come for a room. He came for whoever I wouldn't protect. The pallet jack squealed, and my coworker winced like the sound hurt him. He always acted sensitive. He always acted nice. He always found ways to make me feel like the asshole. He'd flinch at noise, apologize for other people, say no worries with his saint face, then turn around and use it like a knife. If I swore to jam shrink wrapper, he'd do that concerned stare and say I was really intense tonight. If I moved fast, I was spiraling. If I slowed down, I was checking out. If I told him to quit hovering, he'd smile like I proved his point. He'd drift toward the supervisor and drop little comments. How he was worried about me, how I take things personally, how he hopes I'm taking care of myself. Then he'd come back and act like my buddy. If I called him on it, he'd go soft and quiet and make me look like I was attacking him for being kind. That night we were behind, pallets everywhere, and the manager kept texting like it was personal. The supervisor was already pissed, barking about shrink and counts. My coworker kept tapping his clipboard and sighing. He told me to help him count the frozen inventory. I said I had another pull list. He leaned on the pallet jack and said the freezer count was the reason we get yelled at, and if I cared about the team, I'd stop being stubborn. I told him to count it himself. He stepped in close and said, real calm, that I always think I'm above the boring stuff. I snapped, told him to stop acting like my dad. He didn't snap back. He just smiled, slow, like he'd been waiting for me to slip. Then he walked straight to the supervisor and pointed at me like I was a broken piece of equipment. The supervisor waved me over, asked why I'm fighting tasks. I felt my face heat up. I said I'm not fighting, I'm working. My coworker stood there with that sympathetic look like I was having an episode. I swallowed it and went with him because I didn't want another note in the mental file he was building on me. He led me into the walk-in freezer and pointed at a stack of boxes like it mattered. I stepped inside, breathed once, and felt my nostrils stick from cold. The fans roared, and the air tasted like freezer burn and old cardboard. The door shut behind me. Not a swing, a hard slam. I turned, half laughing at first, like real funny, open it. I grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. I shoved. Nothing. I tried the inside release, and my thumb hit resistance where there shouldn't be any. Tape. Thick tape. The safety latch had been taped down. Someone had planned it. Wrapped tight, pressed into the seam, layered like a dam bandage. I ripped at it until my fingers went numb. The tape tore in ugly strands and stuck to my gloves. The latch still wouldn't lift right, like it had been held down, so long the mechanism forgot how to move. I kicked the door until my shin went dead. I threw my shoulder into it until my collarbone screamed. I screamed until my throat burned. The fan swallowed my voice and threw it back at me like a joke. After maybe a minute, my throat started scraping and my lungs felt tight, and I realized I was wasting heat and time. Through the tiny window, I saw him standing outside with his hands in his pockets. He wasn't startled. He wasn't scrambling to help. He stared at me like I was a problem he'd finally solved. He raised his phone and recorded me banging, smiling like he wanted a souvenir. I pounded the glass and flipped him off. He mouthed something I couldn't hear, then turned and walked away slow. No hitty, like he was going to grab a snack and come back when I'd learned my lesson. I watched him disappear down the hall, and it hit me, sharp and plain. Nobody was coming. I tried the handle again anyway, because hope is stupid. Then I started grabbing anything I could use. I dragged a case of fries to the door and smashed it against the latch. Cardboard exploded. The door didn't care. I grabbed the metal edge of a rack and tried to wedge it into the seam, but the cold turned the steel into a brand. I dropped it and swore, and then hated myself for swearing because my lips were already stiff. My hands started shaking so hard I could barely grip. My knees started aching like they were filling with ice. The cold wasn't dramatic. It was steady, dumb, relentless like death. I went to the back wall where the old maintenance panel sat. I slapped it, tried to pry it, got nothing but frozen metal. I ripped boxes open with my nails and pulled out shrink wrap to tie around my hands because the metal burned skin. I wrapped my palms and knuckles, then found a busted crate, climbed it, and shoved my boot into the ceiling vent until plastic snapped. Pieces rattled down on my hood. Cold air blasted my face and tasted like old meat. I forced my arm into the vent anyway and felt something brush my fingers, wet, stringy. Not a cable. Something left there, forgotten, rotting. I jerked back and almost fell. My stomach rolled. I wiped my hand on my sleeve and it smeared. That smell climbed up into my nose and stuck, sweet and sour at the same time. I gagged and kept reaching because dying clean wasn't on the menu. I shoved in deeper, scraping my forearm, feeling along the dark until my fingers hit cord. My hand hit the emergency release cord. I yanked until my shoulder screamed. Nothing. I yanked again, harder, little violent tugs like I could drag the whole door off the hinges. Then the mechanism clunked somewhere near the door. I froze, listening, and heard the tiniest shift like a seal breaking. The door finally popped a half-inch. I dropped off the crate, slammed my whole body into it, and the gap widened just enough to get my fingers in. I heaved. The door groaned like it hated me, and then it gave. I spilled out on the floor, coughing, shaking so hard my teeth clicked. The hallway felt warm and wrong. My hands burned in patches like they couldn't decide what temperature they were. I didn't stand up like a hero. I crawled, then staggered, straight to the office because I wanted proof. If I had video, nobody could gaslight this into oops. The camera monitor was dead. Not glitching. Dead. I opened the cabinet and found the camera box unplugged. Wires pulled loose like someone knew exactly what to grab. The time clock cover was off. Screws sat in a neat little row on the desk. I yanked open the drawer where the cash box lived. Empty. I checked the safe and the keypad cover was bent. I checked again because my brain didn't want to accept how clean it was. It clicked in my head, ugly and simple. He'd used the freezer as a distraction while he cleaned the place out. I found a supervisor, and he came running pissed until he saw my sleeves crusted with frost and my hands shaking. He asked what the fuck happened, then started swearing into his radio like it was going to bring time back. We checked exits, checked the dock. One of the back doors wasn't fully latched. The dumpster gate was open. I kept looking at the hallway where he'd walked away, expecting him to appear like a movie villain. When police showed up, he was back. Of course he was back. He walked in calm, like he'd just stepped outside for air. He acted shocked. He acted concerned. He played the helpful coworker. He even told them I got confused and locked myself in. He kept saying it with this gentle laugh, like I was a dramatic child. He tried to put a hand on my shoulder, and I flinched away so hard I almost fell, and that made me look even worse. I kept saying the latch was taped. He was filming me through the window. The cameras were dead. My voice cracked like I was the one lying. He shrugged and said he'd been trying to document a safety issue because he cares. One cop asked if I'd taken anything, like I was tweaking and hallucinating tape. Another opened the freezer door, closed it, and nodded like that solved it. The tape was gone because I'd ripped it off to survive. The only evidence I had, I destroyed with my own hands. The manager showed up and started swearing about missing money like that was the real emergency. He asked me what I did to start drama. My co-worker stood behind him, hands folded, eyes bright, soaking it in. I wanted to swing on him. I didn't because that's what he wanted. They took statements, asked if anyone saw anything, and got a lot of shrugs. Nights are blind. The recording he made never showed up because why would he keep the part where he smiled at me while I froze? I went home with bruises on my shin and raw skin on my hands, and that vent smell stuck in my nose. I scrubbed until my fingers hurt, and I still smelled old meat. I stood there with frost on my sleeves and the smell of that vent still in my nose, and realized the real horror isn't the building. It's working nights with someone who watches you freeze and calls an accident. The bell at the front desk rang once, sharp, and the guy leaned over the counter like he owned it. No lagi, no code, just wet hair and a grin that kept slipping. Water dripped off his hair onto the counter mat, but his shoes weren't even soaked. He shoved a phone toward me with a booking email on it. Wrong name, wrong date. He kept tapping the screen like pressure could make it true. I asked for ID. He laughed and told me to stop being a bitch about it. Not even angry yet, more like he was testing how far he could push before I folded. He didn't look at my face. He watched my hands, like my hands were the only part of me he needed to control. He pointed at a room number on his phone and said he needed a key right now. That number belonged to a woman who checked in alone an hour earlier. I remembered her because she asked for a quiet floor and extra towels, and she looked wiped out, like she just wanted to shower and disappear. I told him I couldn't issue keys for an occupied room unless the registered guest was present. He snapped that she was his friend, then his girlfriend, then my wife, like cycling the story might unlock the door. I asked for her name. He gave me the wrong one and called me a liar when I said it didn't match. He pushed his phone closer, like I was supposed to be impressed by pixels. Then he shifted toward the opening behind the desk, the swing gate to the back office, like he planned to come around and grab what he wanted. I slammed the gate shut and locked it. The latch clicked loud. His grin died. He slapped the counter, called me every name he could find, and started talking about calling corporate, getting me fired, ruining my life. He pointed at my name tag like he was memorizing it. He leaned in and told me I'd be sorry when my shift ended. I told him the cameras had his face and I was calling police. He laughed again low, like that was adorable. I kept my hands on the keyboard and hit the silent panic button with my knee. It was supposed to alert the manager on duty and the night security number. I watched the little indicator light blink. Nothing else happened. I called security anyway. No answer. I called my manager. Voicemail. I texted, "Guy trying TO, get key to third floor room. Won't leave." Nothing back. I called non-emergency. The dispatcher asked if he had a weapon. I said I didn't know. She asked if he'd threatened me. I said he tried to come behind the desk, and he was targeting a woman's room. She sighed like I was adding work to her night, and told me an officer would come when available. I told him again to leave, or he'd be trespassed. He didn't move. He just turned and sat in a lobby chair facing the desk, legs spread, hands on his thighs, staring at me through the glass like a patient animal. No phone scrolling, no feeding, just waiting. That waiting got under my skin more than the yelling. He'd glance once in a while at the hallway to the elevators, like he was tracking traffic, counting who came and went. When a couple came in drunk from a bar and wandered toward the elevator, he stood up like he was going to slide in with them. I snapped at him to stay in the lobby. He sat back down, smiling, like I just played my part on cue. Guests started complaining about the alarm tests we'd had earlier in the week, like it was my fault. I kept checking the cameras and the hallway monitors, trying to convince myself he'd get bored. He didn't get bored. At 2:40, the fire alarm tripped. Not smoke, a pull station. The panel screamed. Red strobes started punching the lobby walls. The front doors unlocked for safety with that little mechanical click. The elevator chimed and shut down. People started drifting out of rooms, half awake, swearing, asking if it was real. The guy stood up the second those locks released. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even glance at the panel. He walked straight toward the stairwell like he knew exactly what the building would do and when. Somebody yelled that it was probably bullshit and went back to their room. That word, bullshit, hit me like a warning. My brain finally caught up. This wasn't random. He'd been waiting for chaos, waiting for the doors to open and the staff to get pulled away. I grabbed the master key ring and ran. My legs moved before my common sense could scream at me. I heard his steps behind me, steady, not rushed like he had time. I took the stairs 2 at a time, keys biting into my palm. I shouted down that police were coming. He laughed once like I told a joke. I hit the 3rd floor and saw him at her door, already there, already working the handle like it belonged to him. The hallway lights flickered with the alarm. A couple doors cracked open. People peeked out with that pissed, sleepy face like the alarm had insulted them. Nobody moved. Nobody asked what was happening. They just watched. Phones came up. Of course they did. I shoved between him and the door and jammed the key in. I turned it to lock from the outside, trying to buy her a barrier. He grabbed my wrist and twisted hard. Pain shot on my arm. The key ring slipped and clattered down the carpet. He leaned in close and hissed something ugly about how nobody comes on alarms, because everyone assumes it's bullshit. Then he tried to shoulder past me, and I blocked with my body because if he got a hand on that handle again, she was 1 click away from waking up to him in her room. He shoved my shoulder into the door hard enough to rattle it. I heard movement inside, and it made my stomach turn. I headbutted him. I didn't aim clean. I smashed my own nose and felt it light up like a firework. He staggered back. I kicked his knees sideways with everything I had. He went down on the carpet and laughed like it was a game, like I'd finally made the night fun. He started to get up, still smiling, and I realized he expected resistance. He reached for the keys on the floor like we were fighting over toys. I stomped the ring away from him and grabbed it back with shaking hands. People up and down the hall kept filming. One guy in boxers told me to chill like I was the problem. Another woman complained about the noise. Someone shouted that it was just a drunk. I screamed for someone to call 911. A few faces vanished behind doors. Nobody wanted to be the hero at 3 in the morning in a hotel hallway. I backed away. He lunged for my ankle, missed by inches, and muttered that I'd regret it. I bolted to the housekeeping closet, slammed myself inside, and threw the latch. The closet stank like bleach and damp towels. My hand shook so hard the keys rattled. I crouched on the floor and called 911 again, this time not polite, not careful. I said there was an active assault attempt on the 3rd floor, and the suspect was still in the building, and the alarm was pulled on purpose. I gave a room number. I gave my name. I said I was bleeding. Outside the door, I heard steps pause. He didn't pound on the closet. He just stood there for a beat, like he was listening to my breathing, like he wanted me to know he could wait. Then I heard him at the woman's door again, one hard tug on the handle, then a frustrated thump. A second later, he walked away, slow. When police finally arrived, I heard radios and boots and someone yelling for guests to clear the hall. An officer banged on the closet door, and I flinched so hard my shoulder hit the shelf. I opened up, and the hallway spun. Blood kept sliding down my lip from my nose. My wrist throbbed. The officer asked where he went, and I pointed toward the stairwell. Another officer snapped at the people filming to put their phones away. Most of them didn't. They found him near the stairs acting calm, like he was just another annoyed guest. The second they grabbed him, he turned loud and theatrical. He yelled that I knew him, that I invited it, that I was lying because I was crazy. He shouted it at the people filming, planting it in their heads. When they dragged him down the stairs, he kept fighting just enough to make a scene, just enough to leave doubt in a stranger's mind. One officer walked back up with me to the woman's door. He knocked and announced himself. The chain clicked and the door opened a few inches. I saw her eye go straight to my bloody face, then to the officer, then down the hall like she finally understood why her handle had been rattling. She didn't say much. She just nodded fast and shut it again. Chain still on. That was the part that stuck with me. The way she didn't ask for details, because her body already knew. Downstairs, the fire panel finally shut up. Maintenance showed up in sweatpants and started talking about malfunctions. My manager finally called me back and sounded half asleep, annoyed I'd woken him, asking if I handled it and whether the cops needed statement. I told him to come in and look at the blood on my shirt. He went quiet. The alarm report later said malfunction. The pull station cover sat snapped off and missing like someone had peeled it and pocketed it. He didn't come for a room. He came for whoever I wouldn't protect.